On the inside of the urn, which is the teardrop, I decided to put 36 copper roses and had the grandchildren draw or select from the internet different butterfly patterns. My mother's some of her favorite things were when she's seen butterflies, so I thought it was a special personal touching fit to have the grandchildren draw or select images from the internet of the butterflies, and I printed them off onto, most of them were printed at a 1 hour photo processor, and did the size I wanted, and I'm cutting them out for the templates. Tracing them over to some copper I had laying around, getting all the forms that I needed of the butterflies. Here I'm adding some texture with a cross peen hammer. I like a very dull cross peen hammer. I like the way it makes the grooves look as the texture's coming in. Kind of brings it to life, really. A sharp one, I just don't like the look of it. Here I'm adding vinegar and adding salt. Now I'd used white salt and sea salt at different times. Sometimes I mix them, sometimes I different. I always get a slightly different look. I don't really know why. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with ammonia fuming. But here I've spritzed everything with vinegar and I'm putting salt over it. In the bottom of the bucket right here, you can see a rag. That's where I've poured the ammonia. And I'm hanging it, free-hanging everything so that the ammonia fumes will come up and it really puts a beautiful patina on it. There you go. Just so happened it ended up being her favorite shade of blue, which I've never been able to recreate since. Here I've got extra long threaded stems coming through the roses. That way I can run a 632 nut down and then nut the top of it to hold them in place. I've drilled and nutted them. Here I'm figuring out the layout of where I want all the roses and the butterflies. 36 roses in total. I wish I could give you dimensions. Everything I do is mostly eyeball when it comes to stuff like this. There's not really, if you can get it in there, there's not a right or wrong way to do it. Make it your own. I'm counterboring the back side of the hole, that way I can get some weld in there. So I've got these nutted bolted through, or the all thread running all the way through. And so I counterbored it so the nut will sit below flush, and when I weld all the way around it, it gives me plenty of area to weld it. So I grind it back off and it won't have such a chance of having an imperfection in it. Getting everything fit back together. So I cut it in half. Nothing tack welds in the hammer can't fix. Pair of vice grips to manipulate it, pull it back in. A little too much contact area there. Here I've got a 4-inch weldment bung for high pressure pipe, and I'm gonna use a brass clean out from plumbing to seal it, but it's way too deep because eventually after my father passes, he's cremated, my mother and father want to be combined together and then spread somewhere. So instead of having a giant bung sticking through trying to keep most ashes from coming out, I'm slicing it down just slightly deeper than I need. Make sure you check which end threaded first on the pipe threads, that way you don't stick the wrong end in and have to cut it back out. I'll suspend it in the air there with a, I don't know, some kind of holder dealie from the chain hoist. I'm trying to eyeball it as close to hanging pure plumb as I can with the weldment bung sticking out the bottom. Tack weld it in, flip it upside down on that pipe stand I've got there. I've got a cast iron plug in it right now, which ended up being a nightmare because at some point it got sparked off and welded in there, so I had to come in with a chisel, and it took like 2 hours to chisel break the whole entire thing out. I wouldn't recommend that. Got it welded up solid, start spinning it back out and polishing it. Trying to get my final form ground in here. So many hours. I had so many hours grinding and polishing and still had to keep continually coming back. All right, finally moving on to the final phase. Gonna have to cut the final dimensions. I got to stay less than 4 foot. Got to clean up some threads where I left a plug in it while I was welding and it arced off to it, so the threads are a little boogered. I'm gonna start out with Dremel tools, try to clean up with Dremel tools, and then do my final shape, and then heat fire the whole thing to a super red hot heat so it has an even mill scale. Wire wheel it down, lacquer it out, and I think this project will be ready for final assembly after a year. Thank God. Here I'm heat firing it, bring it up. Usually I bring everything up to a super red hot heat so I've got an even mill scale. As soon as this started and I've seen the heat colors travel, I decided to try to capture the heat colors with the spray lacquer I've got. I don't know if it'll hold long-term protected or not. Gonna find out. Yellows, blues, and purples were coming on it. Now that I've got it where I want it, I've used a fan to cool it. Here I'm spraying it with a gloss lacquer. I don't like that. I'm gonna switch back over to a satin lacquer. I don't like the way it's reflecting light. It's too bright and shiny. 3 coats. Right there's the copper bung in the bottom, or brass bung probably. Brass plug. Here's Mom's final urn. New videos are going to be posted every week on Wednesdays, 10 a.m.